welcome to episode 155 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I am here with
Lydia Creech,
Nathan Smith.
And today we are joined by a very special guest, first-time participant on the podcast, Miss Andrea Aswahe. Andrea, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we're going to be normal episode movies we saw this week in part 1. In part 2, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1964's The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. It's going to be a very colorful. We're going to sing the entire part 2. Like, we're not going to talk. We're going to sing the thing through.
I think that's
established, correct?
You keep saying you're gonna sing, Zach, and it almost happened last week on the producers episode, but you just half-assed it. You didn't actually commit. You didn't sing, I need it. I need the Zach Sings episode.
I need my Catherine Deneuve to come in here and be like, Gee, I want to marry you or whatever. I need that to compel me. I'll just say that. Anyway, let's get into movies that we saw this week. We're gonna pick on Andrea since she's new and she's gonna go first. and talk about Dunkirk, which you said you saw this past week. We talked about it a little bit in the last episode, but I'm curious to get your thoughts real quickly. Dunkirk, it's the new Christopher Nolan movie. Follows the episode in World War II history where the British troops were surrounded by the German army and had to evacuate the beach of Dunkirk. But yeah, what were your thoughts on Dunkirk as a whole?
I thought it was actually a really beautiful movie, just visually stunning. I love that he used real effects, with purchasing the boats and the World War II planes and all of this authentic memorabilia to really add to not just the I think to more of the tone of the movie. I think it would have been. It's so easy for it to get kind of Bruckheimer-y and Michael Bay if it's computer generated. I love the sound in it. I'm really big on sound editing and score, and I just love Hans Zimmer's gorgeous score. I think it's just really moving, really tense and suspenseful, very dramatic, but in a way that I didn't feel like he was pushing me to emote. And that's something that I'm really picky about. I don't like to be told how to feel through sound. And I think that he did such a wonderful job, specifically using, I recently saw a video on Vox about it, about his use of time, not just in musical ways, but also in the sound itself, of using the ticking of a clock, specifically with Dunkirk, because it's done in 3 specific time formats that all merging together. So I really loved that. It was visually beautiful. I love that it had very little dialogue, frankly. I think that really played up the suspense factor in the movie, just that tension. And yeah, I thought it was really, really beautifully done for a, quote unquote war movie. Really different than I expected, I think.
Yeah. I'm curious, you talked about the sound in it. On the other podcast I do, we talked to this film music writer about Hans Zimmer and kind of how he's influenced movie scores, but we talked a little bit about specifically Dunkirk, and he was kind of not as hot on Dunkirk as most people. He was like, yeah, I have this, for lack of a better word, hot take on the score of Dunkirk, where he said the problem he had with it was that he felt like all of the tension, all of the kind of stress that you had while watching the movie was less from the storytelling and the script of the movie, and more on how how the score kind of manipulated you. I mean, is that can you see that, or is that a little off base?
I actually think the opposite, because I did not feel pulled. Of course, I feel moved by the music, but rather I was more. I am generally more, I guess, reactive to silence in movies, and just the place of silence within any kind of visual medium, because the absence of sound is so tense and deep. And so I was actually much more tense when it was when the music wasn't on, and instead there was a sound effect. That really ended up affecting me much more in a tension sense. And the way it was shot, that like especially the scenes in the air that you were kind of like upside down a lot, and the scenes in the water where I felt like you kind of felt like you were drowning, or near drowning with the soldiers in the water. I did not feel, I frankly, I understand where, like I said, where you can feel like the music could take over your emotional response to the film. I did not feel that with here. I have felt that with a lot of other movies, and I love John Williams. I adore John Williams. But I feel like that is something that is a little bit of a trademark with John Williams, is that he wants you to feel a certain way with his music. Of course, people want you to feel that way, but when you're looking at a movie, you don't want it to take away from the visual aspect.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Now, in terms of other Christopher Nolan movies, where do you think Dunkirk ranks for you?
Wow. I haven't really thought about that, which is surprising. I really love Christopher Nolan. I think this one, this was such a huge movie for him because it was such a huge collaboration and the star power in it. I think, which I think there are some Christopher Nolan movies that are kind of forgotten about, like Insomnia, which I think is a terrific movie. But I think this is definitely I think in the general consensus of Christopher Nolan movies, it's going to rank high in the sense of like Dark Knight style, with the impact of kind of all the elements being there. You have the star power, you have a great script, you have great cinematography, the effects. It's definitely going to be a contender for the Oscars, definitely in the technical rounds. And I don't know, for me, I wasn't as connected to it as other Nolan movies, because I am just not as connected to like war films. I just I can't relate that much to them. I have to say, this isn't a critique of the movie, but there's no women in the movie. And so I don't see myself in any of the characters, but I can just, I can have an emotional response to being frightened, being scared, being in a terrible situation. But it's hard to place, it's hard to relate to a movie like Dunkirk, but I do see it as like a beautiful piece of art.
Cool. Yeah. I guess if you are interested in seeing Dunkirk, it is in theaters now. We have even more new releases to talk about. We're all new releases today. Nathan, why don't you take over and talk about two that you saw this past weekend?
So the two movies that I saw have been out for a few weeks now, and they came out the same weekend as Dunkirk. The first that I'm going to talk about is Luc Besson's Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, which is adapted from the long-running French sci-fi comic book series Valerian and Laureline, which is huge in Europe and not really a phenomenon in the United States. So when this movie was announced, when the trailer came out, I think a lot of people were really scratching their heads about it, and not super sure what exactly it was. It has probably one of the strangest casts that's ever been assembled. The lead roles are played by Dane DeHaan and Cara Delevingne. I never know how to say her last name. I think that's how you say it.
That's pretty close. I mean, that's as close as you're going to get.
As Valerian and Laureline, respectively. For whatever reason, they decided to remove Laureline's name from the title, which I don't really understand that decision at all. It doesn't, I don't think Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets is somehow a more compelling title than Valerian and Laureline. And I also don't think that the character of Valerian is any more compelling. I don't think Dane DeHaan is any more compelling than Cara Delevingne. So that's kind of a big question mark over the film for a lot of people. It also stars Clive Owen, the great Rihanna. It stars Ethan Hawke also as an eyeliner-wearing pimp who is in the movie for like 5 minutes. Jazz legend Herbie Hancock, Chinese pop star Chris Wu, who if you saw Triple X3, The Return of Xander Cage, you probably remember him as Xander Cage's EDM DJ best friend from that movie. And also Rutger Hauer, obviously from Blade Runner, and just beloved action classics like Blind Fury, where he plays a blind samurai. So this movie, I think, is actually really, really interesting from the production standpoint. It's both the most expensive European and independent film ever made, with a budget that's estimated to be somewhere between 177 and $210 million. I think there's a really interesting alternate history of independent filmmaking. You know, I think we have, when you say independent film, we think of these very small, low to no budget films that are very personal. But I think there is this interesting continuum of films that are very large in scope, but are still independently produced. I mean, you look at like the Star Wars prequels, which were bankrolled with all of George Lucas's money, or something like Catherine Bigelow's K-19, The Widowmaker, which are, you know, these massive spectacles, but are still produced outside the Hollywood system. So this movie, obviously being in 2017 and being able to assemble that kind of budget outside of Hollywood, this is a very internationally targeted film. I mean, the cast that I just read off kind of hits a lot of different markets and a lot of different territories. And in order to raise the money for this film, Luc Besson had to basically sell it to all of the foreign territories in which it's playing before he could make it. And Luc Besson is sort of an interesting figure in the world of film. He emerged in France in the 1980s as part of the Cinema du Look movement, which was this movement of filmmakers whose films were really kind of focused on the texture and the visual sheen of their films and not really a whole lot else. He's probably best known in the United States for movies like The Fifth Element, Leon the Professional, Lucy, and also for producing the Taken and Transporter franchises. But he also has this whole kind of just filmography of movies that he's both directed and produced that have not really ever been successful or even released in the United States, that are huge in France. And he's basically, with his company EuropaCorp, basically created his own industry in France and fostered a lot of filmmakers there, which I think is really fascinating. But just to get away from kind of the contextual stuff, which I'm kind of a nut for, this movie is, I think, because the source material is maybe not super familiar to people outside Europe, it was kind of sold on its spectacle and on its look. It's drawn a lot of comparisons to Avatar, which I think in some cases are valid. But I frankly like it a lot more than Avatar. You know, Avatar's a movie I don't care for that much. And this movie is just basically a whole barrel of fun. It's just crammed full of details. The story doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Basically, the titular city of 1,000 planets is this giant space station that's developed over the course of centuries. The film begins with this montage set to David Bowie's Space Odyssey that starts off in the 1970s and gives us a brief run through to the present day of the history of space exploration. But it keeps going into the future, and basically, for the entire length of the song, there is this montage of spaceships and space stations joining together, and you see people from different countries coming together and shaking hands and joining together. And then eventually, once like a century or two passes, aliens start to board the human spaceship, and everyone is just getting along peacefully, even these really weird looking creatures. You have all these crazy aliens in this movie. There's a species that just mines microchips. There's another one that's really tiny, and they're like experts at neurology and have really sensitive little pincer arms that make them good for like working with brains. So there's just all this fascinating stuff, just detail wise, visually in this movie.
Can you? sorry to interrupt, but can you just confirm?
No, that's okay.
Can you confirm for me how amazing is Space Rihanna?
Honestly, and this is a take that I've been surprised that I haven't seen from a lot of people. I think Space Rihanna, when you first meet her, is great because Valerian goes to this like red light district of the space station called Paradise Alley, where there are all these like weird aliens hitting on him and like asking him if he wants to have sex and stuff. And then he goes into this club where Ethan Hawke is the really flamboyant pimp, and Rihanna just does this like very lengthy dance number that does a really amazing job, I think, of fusing Rihanna's actual talents as a dancer with special effects, because she's just like doing this crazy striptease number and also shape shifting a lot. And it basically crams in like every possible kink and fetish that you could ever want. Like there's Rihanna in a nurse costume and Rihanna in a schoolgirl costume and like Rihanna in the maid costume, and it's just like it gets a little uncomfortable past a certain point, but there are, you know, it's like, I don't know, it was fun, but then there's like this weird moment where you find out that Rihanna's character is a slave, and like Dane DeHaan grants her freedom, and it feels really weird. But then immediately after that, there's a moment where Dane DeHaan and Rihanna both like fuse together and disguise themselves as Ethan Hawke, and then disguise themselves as this giant wobbly robot, and they are like weird alien thing, and they go to save Cara Delevingne, who's going to have her brains eaten out by this alien king, and like Rihanna and Dane DeHaan inside together in this alien body are fighting all of these other giant aliens. So that's really cool. And then like Rihanna's character,
I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Beyond bizarre and
Rihanna's
complicated.
This departs from the movie as quickly as she enters, in a scene that I will not spoil, but one that was very frustrating for me and very shoehorned in. Being a big Rihanna fan, I just honestly wanted Rihanna to like take over the rest of the movie, because a lot of people have complained about the casting of Dane DeHaan and Cara Delevingne and about their chemistry together. Personally, I didn't mind their casting that much. I think that Cara Delevingne is actually pretty good and has a good screen presence. I think that Dane DeHaan is weird. He sounds very much like a young Keanu Reeves, and his character is supposed to be this sort of Han Solo heartthrob, but he ends up coming off as like a really big, cocky douchebag, and doesn't really work for the character that he's supposed to be playing, but I still kind of liked him nonetheless, just because, I don't know, like it's kind of nice to have a leading man who's like got sort of a dad bod and is just kind of like weird and strange, and he doesn't really have any obvious charm or appeal. Like I think that's kind of interesting, and with how weird and all over the place the rest of this movie is, I think he's kind of perfect for it. It's definitely. Sorry, what were you about to say?
No, just saying, you know, it's
just just saying, you know, it's kind of refreshing to see just an average-looking white dude get the girl and be the hero.
I mean, yeah, it is kind of like definitely. I don't know, like it's definitely, I feel like probably Luc Besson's wish fulfillment, and like his very personal fantasy. But it's just kind of like the whole movie is kind of in that same way. It's like just sort of thrown together. Like it's just kind of it's charming in a very awkward way, I think. And Dane DeHaan, I think, is awkward and like fits that. And I don't know, this movie is definitely not a lot of people's cup of tea. It definitely depends on whether you are willing to watch 2 hours of plot that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense and isn't all that interesting, just for some. Oh,
we'll get to that later. Don't worry.
Just for some like
I did that
visual
this weekend.
thrills and some weird physical comedy. And I don't know. It's a strange movie, but. I like strange movies. I would much rather there be large, independently produced strange movies than like, you know, Marvel movies that are all kind of the same. It was refreshing. I had fun. That's really all that it boils down to.
I'm gonna further your point that we need to have Space Rihanna just take over the whole movie and let her do her thing. I think Rihanna should just have her own movie. That's where I'm getting at.
I totally agree with you. I mean, it's like, what a weird filmography so far. Valerian and Battleship. And I guess bring it, whichever one of the Bring It On movies she was in too.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. Well, she's gonna be in that the Ocean's 11, the female one with Sandra Bullock.
Oh, that's
Yes.
right. And
Yes.
the one with Lupita Nyong'o that the internet willed into existence.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, that'll be great.
Yeah, that's true.
So anyways, I said far too many words about Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. But it's in theaters. Probably is not the kind of movie that's going to be in theaters for much longer. So if you like a visually delightful, very weird, cobbled together cinematic endeavors, then I would recommend it. The second movie that I want to talk about, I think has a lot broader of an appeal and is a lot easier of a sell, and that is Girls Trip from director Malcolm D. Lee and produced by Hollywood super producer Will Packer, who's really kind of an interesting figure. He is sort of the man who's credited as discovering Kevin Hart, and he's produced most of Kevin Hart's movies, and he's also had a hand in producing most of the major Hollywood films over the past decade that have been targeted at a black audience. Basically everything from Straight Outta Compton to Stomp the Yard, his name is on. And this movie, it stars, let me pull up the cast list real quick. It stars Regina Hall, Queen Latifah, Tiffany Haddish, and Jada Pinkett Smith. It's a Haddish. I think
it's just Haddish.
Wasn't sure about that one. So it's four friends who went to college together. They called their friend group the Flossie Posse. And over the years, they have sort of kept up with each other, but over the past decade or so have started to go their separate ways. Early in the film, a rift is hinted at between Ryan, Regina Hall's character, and Sasha, Queen Latifah's character, which you learn about through the course of the film. So finally, after many years apart, Ryan, who is this sort of quote-unquote new Oprah, who's become a very successful self-help guru, is going to speak at the Essence Music Festival in New Orleans, which is a real-life music festival that is sort of targeted at African-American women and consists both of musical performances, but also a lot of speakers and a lot of workshops and panels and things like that. So Ryan, having this big opportunity, she and her husband, Stewart, who is a former NFL star, I think, they've created this really successful self-help brand together and are kind of on the cusp of a huge deal that's going to get them a talk show and it's going to get them like a book deal and just a whole lot of money. So they're on the cusp of this big business deal and are going to the festival to close it, but problems in their marriage are starting to emerge. So when Ryan decides to invite her old friends for a weekend of fun and of hookups and debauchery and of all kinds of good nonsense, obviously her friends find out about her marital problems and decide to stick up for her, and kind of everything goes from there. This is just like a really fun movie. It is just a blast in a glass. It's just like the stars have just incredible chemistry with one another. I mean, it's not necessarily the kind of thing that is like, it's not the most, necessarily visually inventive comedy that I've ever seen, but it is very rooted in physical comedy. Tiffany Haddish is just incredible, and a lot of people have sort of compared her breakthrough in this movie to Melissa McCarthy in Bridesmaids, which I think is a fair comparison to make because they are both very much using their bodies. There is a great scene, which I will not give more away about, that involves Tiffany Haddish, a banana, and a grapefruit. And I will just let you know that after this movie, you will never look at grapefruits the same way again.
Oh, grapefruiting.
That's just a warning in case you.
That's a killer selling point right there. That's
in
great.
case you eat a lot of grapefruits, and to you, grapefruits are very wholesome and pure fruit. In that case, you may not want to see this movie. But otherwise, I think you should definitely recommend it. But I think the thing that really sets this apart from something like Melissa McCarthy in Bridesmaids and a movie like that, I think this movie is even more radical than that, because it is so rare that you get to see Black women in a movie where they are celebrating themselves, loving themselves, owning their bodies, and that's just incredibly rare. I think most Hollywood movies that come out that are about Black women, and even just regardless of gender, just Black characters in general, are oftentimes about suffering and about struggle. And this movie is just about a whole lot of fun. Obviously, there's a lot of lessons to be learned about relationships and friendship, and a lot of strong kind of emotional moments, and you definitely feel for these characters and connect with them and learn to love them. But it's, so it does go to some kind of emotionally very real places, but it's just a really fun time, and one of the funniest movies that I've seen at the movies in a long time. But also, if you love R&B and hip hop of the 90s and 2000s, I would definitely recommend you see this movie. I mean, I already knew like 10 to 20 minutes in that this was going to be one of my favorite movies of the year when New Edition shows up and performs one of my favorite New Edition songs. It's also got Mariah Carey, it's got P. Diddy, Neo, Faith Evans, MC Lyte, Dougie Fresh, Common. It's just like packed with incredible performers. Yeah, it's like I don't think you can go wrong with this movie if you're looking just for a good time. I definitely recommend it.
Cool. Yeah. I'm still offer out to the Cinematary listeners. If somebody will come to Savannah and go see Girls Trip with me, I need somebody to go. I need my girls to go with me to go see Girls Trip. So
I'm on my way, Zach. I'm on my way.
Awesome. I need somebody to come see it with me. I'm dying to see it. Anyway, all right. Our last movie we're going to talk about is another new release, and that is Atomic Blonde. I believe Lydia and I are the two who have seen this one. This is the latest from David Leitch, the director or co-director / he didn't get credit or whatever from John Wick. And this follows Charlize Theron. She's the lead character, and she is a undercover MI6 agent who is sent to Berlin during the Cold War to investigate the murder of a fellow agent and recover a missing list of double agents. It also stars James McAvoy, John Goodman, Toby Jones, Sophia Boutella, Eddie Marsan. I think those are the only names that are knowable in this. But yeah, this definitely has a John Wick vibe to it. The unclever minds refer to it as Jane Wick because they're really writing their own material. But I mean, regardless of that, I think that Charlize Theron does she owns this role. If you watch all the YouTube videos of her talking about all the training she did, you can tell that throughout this movie. But yeah, Lydia, I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on this because I think I might just piggyback on what you have to say. But what did you think of Atomic Blonde?
Disappointing, which is, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I mean, you have the trailer and it's got great music and Charlize Theron looks great. Her outfits are great and she's doing these really
amazing outfits.
And the fight sequences look like, they're choreographed and they're going to be shot in takes that you can actually see because that's a big deal to David Leitch. He's a former stuntman. And so, all that's going to be great, but I just didn't care about this movie. And I've been trying to figure out why none of it worked or came together for me. And I think it's because this movie's too dumb to do It's too dumb to do a clever spy, double cross, triple cross, get the MacGuffin list. And
yeah. Well, Well, I was kind of thinking about this compared to like John Wick, because I mean, there you have, outside of just David Leitch, you kind of have that comparison where it's like the one agent against everybody kind of thing. And I think that John Wick understood, one, to just kind of keep the plot uncomplicated.
Keep
the
it
first
simple,
one is
stupid.
just, yeah, they killed his dog, he's gonna kill them. Like that's all it is. And yeah, this one's trying to like, keep you twisted up, and it's just like it's very just after about an hour and a half, you're just like, you need to wrap this up. It's over.
I don't know. After about 30 minutes, I thought about walking out. Like, I don't know.
Oh, wow.
It started very strong. Had the New Order song, and then you have like the German version of Major Tom, and then 99 Luftballons. And I'm like, okay, I like this like Euro pop 80s sort of soundtrack. It reminded me a little bit of The Lure, which is also like in this industrial Berlin, everything's kind of gray and communist and sad setting.
No, that's true.
I like it, but I didn't know what was happening. I didn't care what was happening. And it almost pulled it together for that amazing fight scene in the hallway. It's like the centerpiece. Set piece.
And they set that thing up like it's kind of funny because you mentioned all the music that they use, and during every other sequence in that movie, there's some needle drop where they play a song, and that one is so funny. I was thinking about it while watching it, but I was like, this doesn't have any, like, it's completely silent, and I was like, you've needle dropped this entire movie, but like this is like the highlight fight sequence, and you just like let it happen. I mean, I guess that's it was fine.
No, I liked that. That was great. But then the movie kept happening for like another 30 minutes after it. I was like, why? That should have been your climax. You should have stopped there.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that fight sequence is incredible.
It's so good.
All it's shaped to be like one take, and the thing that I really loved about it was that you can feel the, like, with Marvel movies, it seems like they're punching, and they could be punching for like an hour and a half and they don't ever get tired. You never feel any like energy being exerted. You just kind of feel you feel the punches, but then the superhero is fine. And then this one, by the end of that fight, like Charlize Theron's like limping around and like gasping for air and holding her chest, and it she does not look like she should be continuing fighting, but she has to because this other guy's doing the same thing. I think the plot, because you have like she gets to Berlin, and then James McAvoy character is like this agent for British intelligence, and he's kind of on his own, and you have John Goodman, who's like this American agent. I don't really know why he's involved, and Toby Jones is kind of like the M of MI6
and the French are there for some reason.
The French are there, and so they have Sofia Boutella, and I don't know why she's involved. It's just this movie that they like. It seemed like David Leitch and the screenwriters got really excited about all of these different things, and it feels like they're trying to do a trilogy of movies all in the one movie. And I think that they just needed to just stick her in Berlin and go, she has to find these files. It can be a MacGuffin, like whatever, but like just simplify it. But there's so much like twist and turn, and it never really feels earned. And so I'm exhausted, not from all the punching and shooting and all that stuff. I'm just exhausted because I'm trying to keep up with this fight, and all the while they're doing this storytelling device where they keep cutting to like every
like a debriefing. What happens all a after. Flashback.
And I thought that's such a frustrating device, because I thought the movie would kind of gain some momentum when it was doing the stuff in Berlin, but then it would get cut off because we had to cut back to this debriefing, and I was like, it's just a very confused movie. It's constantly trying to be very cool, and it is very cool for the most part, but it just, I don't know. It's I don't know if I hated it as much as you did. Like I still I would watch it again. It's fine, but it was a very frustrating watch. It's just, I don't know. I was disappointed as well.
I don't know. It just has all the things that I know that I like, and it did not come together just at all.
Yeah. No. It's. I don't know. There's just a lot going on in that movie.
Maybe they'll make a sequel, because I can tell they're trying to set up some world. There's like a watchmaker type of character that seemed very John Wicky. So maybe if they do a sequel, it'll be better. But that's not how you should watch your movies. Like, it should be better the first time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, after watching this, I appreciated John Wick a lot more because the second one tries to do a little bit more, but it still feels very contained. Like John Wick and John Wick 2 are just like, you look compared to Atomic Blonde, you're just like, those movies are so simple. Like, they're so basic. And there's something I'm like, I really like that. Yeah, it's fantastic because you don't have, all of these double agents and twists and turns. It's just
Deadpool 2, baby.
Yeah, I couldn't keep up.
That's what's coming next from him. So
yeah. I don't know. It's like I don't know if I don't feel like Deadpool 2's plot's going to be that advanced, so maybe he can handle it. But yeah, I'm much more of a fan of Chad Stahelski, who did John Wick 2 by himself, than David Leitch.
I know he's got a better grasp on the emotional strings, because I didn't give a shit about the stakes. There were no stakes to Atomic Blonde. None at all.
No, well, you had no idea what was going on, so you couldn't invest in anything other than, I hope Charlize doesn't die.
And we know she doesn't die because she's debriefing. Like, the whole movie's a flashback.
I didn't trust that it could. I felt like she could still die. I was so confused.
I was like, there's no tension in this at all.
That's true. Well, if you want to be confused and disoriented, Atomic Blonde is now in theaters.
You could just listen to the soundtrack.
The soundtrack,
it's really good.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and there's some. There's still some fun moments, and honestly, I wouldn't advocate going because this movie's super long. It's long. 2 hours, but you feel all 2 hours of it. But the fights, the stairway fight sequence that people are talking about, that is
after
really
that.
worth seeing.
Go to see that and then just leave when the fight's done.
That's true.
She lives. It's fine.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up part 1. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in part 2 talking Umbrellas of Cherbourg after this.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Andrew Swafford with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company and because we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. Firstly, leave us a review on iTunes, preferably a positive one, because the algorithm gods tell us that reviews increase our podcast exposure. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send an email to cinematary@yahoo.com so that we can hear from you guys for a change. Maybe you think I'm an idiot for not liking Singing in the Rain, or maybe you have a suggestion of a movie that you really want to hear our opinion on. Regardless, let us know your thoughts, and we'll read them out and respond to them on future episodes of Cinematary. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions we bring to you guys every week. So to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and share with your friends and family. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
And we are back with part 2 of episode 155 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1964's The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. The film is written and directed by Jacques Demy, and it stars Catherine Deneuve and Nino Castelnuovo. And the film follows a pair of lovers, Guy and Genevieve, who hope to get married but are kept apart because her mother disapproves of the relationship and he is summoned to the army. And then melancholy sadness ensues for the next hour or so. Umbrellas is the middle in an informal romantic trilogy of Demi's films that shares some of the same actors, characters, and overall look. It started with Lola in 1961 and then went to The Young Girls of Rochefort in 1967. The continuous music score and brightly colored photography have much to do with the popularity of this film. Formally, the work is operatic, with the plot advanced entirely through dialogue sung with accompanying music. The color photography is bright and vivid, and the whole is united by an orchestral score of simple rhythms and tunes that are integrated with a story covering 5 years. The film score established composer Michel Legrand's reputation in Hollywood, and he later scored other films, winning 3 Oscars. In North America, 2 of the film's songs became hits and were recorded by many artists. I Will Wait For You, the main theme, and Watch What Happens, which is Cassard's story, the character who ends up marrying the Genevieve character. Both were given new English lyrics by lyricist Norman Gimbel. And Tony Bennett's performance of the theme song was added to one version of the soundtrack CD, while Harry James recorded a version of Watch What Happens on his 1977 album Coming From a Good Place. In 1979, an English language stage adaptation with lyrics translated by Sheldon Harnick was premiered at the Public Theater in New York City. The film was originally shot on Eastman negative stock, which rapidly faded and became almost unusable. The various copies of the film used in the cinema circuit gradually lost their quality. Umbrellas could not be seen with the rich colors which Demme had originally intended. Knowing that the Eastman stock would fade over time, Demme had made the three main yellow, cyan, and magenta color separation masters on black and white negative films, which do not fade. This project was similar to the creation of the older Technicolor process. In the 1990s, Demme's wife, film director Agnes Varda, headed a project to create a new color negative film from the 3 black and white separations. Restored full color prints were made from this in 2004. The resulting film recaptured Demme's vision of a fantastically colorful Cherbourg. Composer Michel Legrand assisted in restoring the original 4-track stereo sound masters to digital, and he remastered his score to produce a higher quality version, which is on CD and vinyl. A digital version of the film was released on Blu-ray in 2013, and in a restored version, they also restored it independently in 2004 with color grading supervised by Demme's son, Matthew Demme. In 1964, the New York Times said about the Umbrellas of Cherbourg, it is a cinematic confection so shiny and sleek and sugar sweet. So Jacques Demme's brightly colored French musical film, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which opened tonight at the Little Carnegie, seldom in my recollection has a French movie maker indulged in such a flow of romantic contrivance and sheer decorative artifice as does Mr. Demme in this picture, which won the grand prize at the Cannes Festival last spring. Not only has he resurrected the quaint and artificial device of having the dialogue set to music and unrealistically sung, but he uses this operatic method to tell a story that is so banal, so clearly ingenuous and old-fashioned that it wouldn't go beyond a reader in Hollywood. That seems a little like, I don't know. Yeah, I was like, that seems a little rude. In 2004, Roger Ebert reviewed the film, saying the very last scene of a final meeting between Guy and Genevieve is one of such poignancy that it's amazing the fabric of a musical can support it. I had forgotten many of the details of the story in the 32 years since first seeing it. My mental images were of smiling garage mechanics and Catherine Deneuve happily singing with her lover. The film is incomparably richer and more moving than that. And although the idea of having the actor sing, or more exactly lip sing, every single line might sound off-putting, it's surprisingly how quickly we accept it. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg did not initiate a new movie style, although Demme tried it again with The Young Girls of Rochefort in 1967, which Deneuve starred alongside Francois Dorlic and Gene Kelly, but it is remembered as a bold, original experiment, and now that it is restored and back in circulation, it can be remembered as a surprisingly effective film, touching and knowing, and like Deneuve, ageless. So, on that note, how many times has everybody seen Umbrellas of Cherbourg? Because I feel like we're all multiple times.
I think 3 times. I think
This was my second time.
I've seen it twice.
So I'm kind of I think the first thing I'm curious about, because this is something I've read a lot and listened and heard on podcasts that talk about the movie, and it's a film that depending on like when, like what age range you see it, I think people seem to have different responses. I remember in the last picture show when they talked about Umbrellas of Cherbourg, when they talked about that in La La Land last year. They were, I think it was Keith Phipps who talked about the first time he saw it, and he really got swept away in the kind of idealistic romance, and so it was just so he just became so overcome with how sweet and savory it was. But then when he watched it after being married and when he was older, he talked about how emotional he got when that ending hits, because it's just such a gut punch of reality that after years of just kind of living, you better understand the pain and the emotional just hit of that final sequence between Guy and Genevieve. But what do you guys think? I mean, is there a kind of progression that you've seen each time that you've watched it?
I mean, we're all in our early 20s.
Not me, honey.
So,
I'm almost 30. So
I didn't know that.
That's okay.
But like, I'm just thinking, I too have seen like a lot of people responding. Like when I watched when I was 20, I thought it was just this horrible tragedy that they didn't wind up together. And then when I revisit it and I'm older, you just see that's how life is, and it's more bittersweet and than just horrible and tragic. And like, I'm not there in my life.
I can pick up from that from Nadia. Actually, I do feel like that I am on my way there. No, what I think it is similar to, so, I don't know how familiar your listeners are with a movie like this compared to something much more, blockbuster-y, or rather romantic, like say like The Notebook, which or La La Land, which I feel like, aside from, we know that La La Land was like this movie greatly inspired La La Land, something like The Notebook or these like this is what Nicholas Sparks wants his movies and his books to be like, right? A beautiful story of young lovers and separated by war and this and that, and he'll never get to this, of course, but I feel is that you're totally right. When you are young and you don't have as much experience either in life or love, this is like kind of like the first time you read Romeo and Juliet, right? You feel like this is so romantic, and then you grow up and you realize like these kids are 12 or 13, and this is irresponsible. But yeah, no, I feel like it's this beautiful, tragic love story, and I do feel for them, but it's one of those things that you start to realize as you grow in relationships and in yourself, that that sometimes, like any kind of relationship, whether it's romantic or platonic, it like ebbs and flows, right? And so it's kind of like a natural cycle of life. And so I think that if I had watched it when I was in college, I definitely would feel like weeping and like, how could this happen? This is great love. And I still cried the first time I saw it, because I thought it was really beautiful. But I don't think it's a cynicism or a pessimism. I think it's something like a sense of like a sense of an ending and learning about endings, and how and how everyone is a little, you try to do the best you can and you try for the best in your life, but sometimes you're always going to have kind of like that unrequited love, or that first love and that true love, and maybe you end up with that person, maybe you don't, but I think it's something that anyone can relate to, and like you said, it's going to be different regardless of where you are in your life.
I think that the experience people have with this movie, I think that it can be compared to the experience that a lot of people seem to have with Richard Linklater's Before trilogy, where maybe when you're younger and you're kind of, you're in your salad days and a little more misty-eyed, Before Sunrise really appeals to you. But as you get older and you've had some experience under your belt in relationships and just in life in general, Before Sunset starts to make more sense and to to appeal to you more. And then as you've been in a relationship for a long time, maybe Before Midnight, is really kind of hits close to home. But I will admit, I think that for me, at least, like my experience with this movie has been pretty consistent. That like it does make me very sad, and it is very sad. And I think part of that has to do with just its so kind of bold on every level. It's the characters and the songs are expressing a lot of emotion, but there's a lot being expressed visually too. And so I think that sort of melodrama really makes us feel a lot, whatever that emotion is. But I do think that like the ending and as it's been called both already on this podcast and by many other people as bittersweet, I think is, the best word to describe it. It's like both of these people are, in their own ways, ostensibly happy and successful and doing fine. And maybe when they were younger and had all these fantasies, it's not what they planned for themselves, but it is something, and it's something good. And so things have worked out. It's basically kind of the plot of the song Cool by Gwen Stefani, after all these things that we've been through, like, we're cool. Like we can be here in this moment together, even though at one time we were madly in love with each other, but now we're not, and it's fine. And we have those memories, but it's okay. And one other thing, just real quick, that I want to say before I pass the mic to everybody else is that I think one of the other things about this movie that is very sad in a way, but is something that I really like about it is, just not just how clued it is into kind of emotional realities that we all feel in relationships that we have, but that it is very tied into kind of very real socio-political realities, especially in that time in France. Guy gets drafted to serve in the Algerian War, and Genevieve and her mother are really struggling. Before the podcast, we were joking about like, they own an umbrella shop. Like, that is the most ridiculous idea for a business, just a store that sells umbrellas. But even then, it's like, even though you're kind of like, maybe in the beginning of the movie, you're like, this is ridiculous that they're just selling umbrellas and that they hope to make a living just selling umbrellas. It's like, you really feel for them. And the mother is very concerned that her daughter is going to marry somebody who has sufficient means. So I really like that. It's that it shows that you can make a film that on one hand is very emotionally real, that is grounded in real issues that people face and have faced, but you can do it in a way that is still very artificial, for lack of a better word, I think, for that is very colorful, that is not necessarily attempting to create some kind of cinematic reality, that is still candy colored and confectionery and all those things. So, well,
that's a kind of good segue to something else we could talk about. How did everybody kind of respond to that, to kind of the aesthetic that Demi puts in place? Because it is very striking. There's bright pinks and blues and yellows that just kind of jump out at you. That really, I feel like, grabs your attention outside of whatever's happening with the plot. That you're just kind of taking in this almost overwhelming amount of color. How did everybody respond to that?
I thought it was, I thought it was really beautiful, but I also thought it was interesting because, again, I'm going to like compare it to like the last movie I saw like this, which is La La Land. At the beginning of the movie, we see much brighter colors on Genevieve, much brighter colors than as we see her progressing after Guy has left, when she, I don't know how spoilers work, but when she is pregnant, she wears pastels, she wears muted colors, and then the actual city is a little bit more muted as well. So I think it follows, like, the colors, the brightness of the colors follow like the development of their relationship with the city itself. But I thought it's very interesting to see such bright colors in such an emotionally charged movie, because in today's cinema, we see the opposite, right? People, have complained that like some movies, like The Beguiled, right, is so dark. It's so literally, because it's so dimly lit that people can't even see parts of the natural setting. And so in order to draw more tension and emotion from it. And so this is like the opposite, right? In order to draw more attention to the city and the situation, he plays up the color rather than goes grimy or sepia or black and white, which is such a difference to our current cinema. And I think it's really cool to see that. I think to have that juxtaposition of this bright cinematography or setting, and this very melancholy, recitative and soundtrack and script.
I think I really like Demi, and I think it's interesting to consider him like with the other French new wave directors, because a lot of them worked in like black and white and kind of handheld cinematography, like kind of very intimate and close. And then Demi goes all out like these crane shots and like obsessive production design. And it's just so much more inviting. It reminded me of the film we did earlier, Meet Me in St. Louis. Like it's a musical and it's like really like all the colors are very deep and emotional. And I feel like that's very necessary for this sort of fantasy, like the musical is a fantasy genre. So,
and I think what's like, to me, I think both has a, there's ways in which he is like the French New Wave, but there are
like the socioeconomic kind of.
Well, I think even beyond that, the fact that he's taking so much from a clearly established Hollywood genre. But I think what the difference is that Demi is really taking visually from them, whereas so many of the other filmmakers were taking a lot from kind of the tropes of like noir and
Hitchcock.
Yeah, exactly, and character archetypes, and we're maybe saying like, okay, we're going to do this in a cheaper, faster way that breaks the tradition of quality, that's not stiff and fussy, that's really messy and dirty and in the street. And so Demi is like doing the same thing, where he's like taking these tropes from genres, but they're kind of visual tropes, the colors and the production design and the imagery. But then he's fusing it with this social awareness.
And he's also constantly pointing back at himself, like this is a movie.
Yeah.
There's a character in the garage who's like, I don't like opera, I like movies, and he keeps saying it.
Yeah.
And the mother goes, people don't die of love, that only happens in movies. And it's like, hey, you're watching a movie. Just kind of pointing back, reflexivity, I guess.
And then you have like decades before the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or you have kind of the Demi Cinematic Universe, where the Roland Cassard character is the main character of Lola, which like I watched Lola for the first time maybe like a week or two ago, and I was like 5 to 10 minutes into it, and I was like, this guy looks so familiar. He looks so familiar. And I was like, oh wow, he is literally the same character from Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
It blew my mind. It also, like, when I watched Lola, it didn't even register, and then I watched Umbrellas again, and I was like, holy shit, that's the same guy. And because then he does like the song, and he literally goes through the little market area that's from Lola, and I was like, damn, like, yeah, that's why I was like, damn, Demi's over here, creating cinematic universes. We didn't even give him any credit.
And there's also one of the melodies in Umbrellas of Cherbourg is in Lola. And I don't know if that was originally in there and then they just appropriated that melody for Umbrellas, or if that was something that was maybe added in later when the film was restored.
Let's look. I'm gonna look while you
Did Graham do Lola too?
while you chat.
I don't know.
Let's we're gonna tread some water. He did, yeah.
Man, it's like right, Zach, when you command us to talk, all the things that I had to say immediately leave my mind.
No, you're fine. This is my, I think, third or fourth time watching this movie, and it's kind of funny. I feel like at this point I know the beats of the film, like where all the points that you kind of are most iconic from it, are whether it's the kind of the first time they meet and the first date that you see them have, to the whenever they find out that her mom doesn't like him and he has to go to war, and they're crying in the bar. And then you have the whole this time watching, I really got emotionally like swelled up in the scene when he gets on the train. That just the way that Demi frames that whole sequence where he gets on the train and she's there standing by the tracks, and it drives off, and the music just completely swells up to like to the loudest it's been in the film yet. That one that really got me. But what I was kind of thinking about, especially with like the first question, was this is definitely a movie that I'd like to I'm going to be interested to kind of go back and see it in 10 to 15 years and see kind of how I respond. I think I agree with your I definitely agree, and I see the points that people make who are watching it at age 40 or 45 or something, who are watching it much where they've lived a lot longer and are kind of responding to it, and whenever they talk about it, I'm like, oh, I can see that, and I can kind of emotionally get there. But I also think that I agree with I think Nathan made this point. I agree where you really get I think that once after living, after being, around for so long and experiencing, so many different things, and kind of having some, having experiences that maybe don't directly relate to this, but kind of have similar through lines that I just feel like what works so well with this movie is that it just kind of has these strings that it's able to tug and pull and resonate with you, regardless of really how closely you relate to the story. I think that there's something that still resonates with you, and I think that's just kind of a testament to Demi. I think that he's kind of able to do that. I think that this one works probably the best out of the three of his informal romantic trilogy, but I think that all three of them, Umbrellas, Lola, and Young Girls, they all kind of have that ability to really really just hit you in this emotional spot that I think few movies have really the ability to.
And I also think one thing that is nice about all three of those films that you mentioned is that they all take place in towns that I think most people would probably not want to live in, just because they're, these like small port towns where you've got sailors coming in and out all the time. There's probably not tons to do, not a whole lot of people. But he just injects them with all of this beauty and finds all this beauty in them and makes them seem really like these, I don't know, these kind of like constellations of just beauty, and when in real life they may be a little drab, probably. I don't know, that he just I just love that he's able to kind of find that and create that.
Yeah. Well, he creates this kind of romantic quality to him where there's something appealing to be, to stop in and go to, the little market store in Young Girls of Rochefort, or that little corner kind of coffee shop place that the Roland character keeps going to in Lola, or in Umbrellas. They go to that little dance club area that's like where all the walls are red. It's very striking. That reminded me of the restaurant that Jimmy Stewart goes to stalk Kim Novak's character in Vertigo. But there's something that very that seems very quaint and appealing about the cities that he drops you in, because I don't know, it feels like there's like, even though they're small and they don't have like the vivacity or the life of something like Paris or London or New York, there's still like this kind of nice emotionality to all of the people involved that really, that's very appealing to you. Now we talked a little bit about the music and kind of the score. Does anybody have any strong feelings about the whole the fact that they sing? Yeah, the fact that they sing the entire time. I know Lydia has had some issues with that in the past. So that's why I'm more asking. I'm curious why Umbrellas works for you and something like the most recent Les Mis did not work for you.
Well, for me, it's the way the music's employed. Demi just kind of makes it a part of the universe of the film. And I know this is the point of musicals, like you expect people to break out into song and dance numbers and like stop the show, stop the plot, and that is usually really annoying to me. And also they're all really good singers, and Russell Crowe is not a good singer.
Yeah.
Shouldn't sing.
Oh my God. Thank you for
So that
saying
didn't
that.
work
I
for
am
Les.
see, I love recitatives, but it's because like I have a classical music background and like I gone to the opera, and I love the allusions to opera that they have in the movie. Like the first date that we see of them is they go to see Carmen, which is this beautiful opera by Georges Bizet, and the guy in the, like, I think you mentioned it earlier. I don't remember who mentioned it, saying earlier that the guy in the garage says, I don't like opera, movies are better. And he says, all that singing gives me a pain, which is so funny because they're using a recitative the entire film, which I love. But like you said, Les Mis totally threw me off just because like Russell Crowe is cast as the world's worst Javert. And it's tragic, but I think it's definitely an acquired taste. I mean, I love it, but I can see how people would get like very easily annoyed by it.
I mean, I think it's also Broadway kind of musicals, just the way the songs are written are different. Like the style of the songs are much different than what Legrand does.
Yeah, I mean this soundtrack is very jazzy, and the way that the characters sing is very indicative of that. But I also think one of the key differences is that this is a musical that is written with the screen in mind, and it isn't a stage adaptation. Whereas I think one of the big failures of Les Mis is, as has already been said, getting non-professionals to sing these parts that you really need lungs for, and also because that stage musical, it's like I love the musical and I fucking hate that movie. It's one of the worst movies I think I've ever seen in a theater, and I think that Tom Hooper is one of the worst directors working today. My fury towards that movie is unrelenting. But I think one of the things too is that you see that musical and the stage show is always very stripped down. Whereas the movie tries to like create this sort of visually epic story, and so the musical itself is really grounded in the music, and that's kind of the focus, and not the visual imagery so much, even though the choreography is really important too. Whereas with Umbrellas of Cherbourg, I think the images and the music are kind of both given equal footing and are both considered equally in the creation, so they work together better. And I think there are really very, in my mind at least, very few musicals that are adapted from the stage that really work as movies. I mean, for me, like one of the big ones is West Side Story, because I think that's another example of something where the music and the images are kind of given equal footing and are balanced out with each other.
I'd go a little more recently, and I think that Chicago is a great movie musical, or rather like stage musical turned movie. I actually think that's a really good adaptation, but West Side Story is classic, right? It's terrific. Hello, Dolly is beautiful. But I think that what you said about Les Mis being such a complicated movie compared to the musical, when you see the stage musical, we are, like you mentioned, Nathan, it's a very basic, quote unquote basic set, and we imagine revolutionary France. And so in the movie, we see it everywhere. And so in like the opposite manner, in Umbrellas, it's a very simple, very colorful stage. But it has, if we think about it as a play or a musical, it's like their home, Guy's home, the umbrella shop, the bar, and the exteriors, right? The garage a little bit. So it can be seen more, like you said, it goes really well from movie to stage rather than the opposite way of stage to movie, where you're trying to build the world. In this way, it would transfer pretty easily to a stage script. So I think that's why it's probably not as jarring for the recitative.
And I think too, you mentioned Chicago, and I think Bob Fosse and Cabaret Cabaret is another really good example of a stage to screen musical. And I think part of that is because Bob Fosse, both being a choreographer but also a really talented filmmaker, understood how to use editing to kind of enhance people who are already very talented at performing on the stage. And Demi, for whatever reason, I don't really know if he had a musical background, but he really just at least seems to be someone who loves music and who loves jazz a lot and has a good understanding of it. Whereas I feel like in the case of Tom Hooper, he doesn't seem to be somebody who really understands music that much, not movies either, though obviously some people think he understands movies. But I think the creative forces behind it have to have both of those understandings, and like you said, it needs to work both as a musical and as a movie, and I think that's why this succeeds.
Yeah. I mean, just at me next time, Nathan. You can just say my name. It's cool.
Wait, do you really like Tom Hooper?
I have a video essay where I talk about the King's Speech directed by Tom Hooper, but that's fine.
Yeah. Hey,
I do love
no shade. King's Speech is solid. So,
all right.
I also really like his John Adams miniseries. I think that was pretty solid too. So
he just doesn't need to direct musicals. That's we can get at that.
No.
Yeah.
Or maybe we can just get no one to direct Les Mis.
That's true.
And,
I think although actually, version. Who was originally planning to direct the Les Mis movie musical in French?
Who?
Jacques Demy.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
He was going to do that. Yeah, never happened, but
that's a great what if. All right, as we kind of wind down, any closing thoughts on the Umbrellas of Cherbourg?
I just want to say that I really felt for the mother character this time around. She's pretty funny, but also I felt bad for her because I think she was building up to a crush on Cassard. And like she's getting there.
It's so funny. It's so funny because in Lola, there's a mother character who also really seems to have a crush on him, but he's like the worst character.
Some sort of Oedipal complex.
Yeah, it's weird. He sucks. Like in both movies,
he's a little better in Umbrellas.
He's going after a 17-year-old. No.
He is.
He's pretty annoying though in Lola because he's just like constantly like, nobody likes me and I don't know what I want to do, and they're just like, I don't know what to do for you, buddy.
And it's like, oh yeah, Lola, I hate you because our lives just drifted apart and you're not in love with me still after like 15, 20 years. Yeah. And you have a child by another man. Oh, excuse you for like not loving me. Okay, Roland.
Yeah. Andrea, did you have anything, closing thoughts?
I think the one thing that on a second viewing that this movie reminded me of a little bit, and it's similar to what we started the conversation with, which is, a movie that you can see multiple times in your life and have a different reaction to, is a movie I love that it's like so stereotypical, like girls love this movie, which is The Way We Were, which I'm just like head over heels for that movie. It also has a really powerful theme that is, strung through the entire movie, and it's just really beautiful. But the same kind of like melancholic themes through it about this love that could have been, or things that you think love is going to what you think love is going to be like when you're young, and how it develops and how it grows and then can, devolve as you get older and as lives change. And so I would say that if you like this movie and you haven't seen The Way We Were, I would recommend The Way We Were.
I think I've said all I can say. I think I've said all my thoughts, but this is
recommend that people should check out more Demi. I'll join you on that.
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure.
Yeah, I really like Young Girls of Rochefort as well. That one's great. Lola's fine. Lola's weird because it's like this mixture of like those two, like Umbrellas and Young Girls. It's like a mixture of that plus like the French New Wave, because it's in black and white. It feels very French New Wavy. You could see Jean-Luc Godard or Francois Truffaut kind of like doing a similar story, especially Godard. But it's still fine. It has some good moments. Anakami, who plays Lola, is pretty fantastic. All right. Well, I guess that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all of the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with another comedy. We've been very cheerful lately. It is 1971's A New Leaf, because everybody should appreciate Elaine May.
Yes.
That's
Very
that's the gist of
one.
that.
So excited.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. But yeah, I would also I'll have my own self promotion. Please go to the website at cinematary.com. I posted a video essay on the use of the second movement in Beethoven's Seventh Symphony in film, with the King's Speech included in that. So. I don't praise Tom Hooper too much. It's not really, he just slapped a song on something in this movie, so I can't really. But I do talk.
Hey, Zach, it's not a song. It's not.
That's
a song.
true. I'm gonna be pissing off classical music fans, So
A song has lyrics.
yeah, whatever. Tomato, movie, film, whatever. You can get over it. You know what I'm talking about. But the piece, ironic. I do talk about Lola because it uses that piece in that movie. But yeah, thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next week.